Let me test. Hello. I'm Kathleen Galas, and I'm very honored to be here today. I'm an educator first, researcher and technologist second. But my primary interest is learning in the context of education, or formal or informal education. So basically, learning is at risk right now. What's happening right now as our world is changing so fast? We are changing technologically, and our world is becoming ever more complex. It's not simple, it's not stable as it used to be. It used to be the same over time. Now that it's changing so fast, we have to adapt in different ways. We have unlimited access to all kinds of information, yet that information alone doesn't do anything. It's the meaning making that we do with that information that is important. So the way we do that is we go back to the child, playing, questioning, and imagination. And these should never lose their focus. The adult that is fully formed still has all of these things, still plays, still questions, still has imagination. Those are primarily important. Excuse me if I try to go. Yeah. We talk about something called agency in education. And agency is the ability to act in our world. How do we act in our... Am I too close? Okay, the ability to act in our world. It's beyond the know-how, beyond I know how to do something, but it's the ability to form and actually carry out projects. We've all come in contact with other people and ourselves at times where we know how to do something, but we somehow cannot accomplish that task. And some of that is because of our agency in that. How do we make those transitions? So the frameworks of making sense and learning in our constantly changing world. We have two things at stake here. We have our massive information network and a structured environment. And those two things, I usually talk with my hands, and this is difficult because I can't do it. So these two things together work in concert, one without the other, and we really aren't making meaning, or we aren't following through. So we need the information, yet we need the environment. I'm sorry, I'm working on changing this. So the new ways of learning and how we accomplish this practice. I'm sorry, this is going, yeah. No learning occurs without a relationship. And this is becoming even more important in our completely connected world. No learning occurs without a relationships. Our connections and our relationships are where we make meaning. We have information, but what we do with it, who we talk to, how we change it, how we actually make use of it in making programs, in finding out how our users use those programs, in changing it again because of that. Those are all important. And completely without those, we have no learning. I'm sorry. I just wanted to go into a couple areas, give you a little bit of background on where I'm coming from. I began a long time ago working with Logo and the ideas of Seymour Papert. So the simple ideas of Logo in an environment with children who were able to program quickly, but using the idea of the physical world first. And that's, again, another piece that we cannot lose, especially with younger children and with people new to any field. So when we say something for kids, it's really something for anybody new in that field learning whatever it is you're learning, because we all learn like kids. There's a wonderful website called Neuroscience for Kids. If you don't know a lot about the brain, you need to go there. It's a wonderful site, has all kinds of hands-on learning. But it's for kids, anybody who is not an expert in that site. So logo was a way of connecting the physical world with the digital world and making programs. It was building things. It was very easy to do. We did a longitudinal study with kids over 5 years using logo, and we used lots of different configurations with gender, with apprenticeship, and with design learning, and found that kids were, first of all, the primary ingredient for learning is engagement. If you aren't excited about it, you're not going to learn it. So whatever it is you want to learn, whether the outside world is not helping you to become excited about it, somehow you have to do that for yourself. Because if you're not, you won't learn. So in the longitudinal study, our kids learned a lot. They worked together in teams. They learned how to work with each other and collaborate. So our new ways of learning. The old ways in static schools with rows as we have today, and me speaking at the front, being what we call the sage on the stage, doesn't work. So to really learn about things, we have to change. The new media makes our peer-to-peer learning easier and more natural. We can find that kids will learn from each other more quickly and in better ways than just from the teacher to the student. The collective nature of participation becomes really important, and applications and environments that help that collective nature are incredibly important at this point in time. This is, whoops, I lost Miriam. This is Miriam, quite a while ago, explaining logo to somebody at ACM. Completely comfortable with explaining to an adult how she made things happen and made science simulations with the tool that she had at her disposal. This is a while ago. Now, the tools that we have are even greater. Sorry, this keeps going ahead. So, squeaky toys. I worked with students that also had been using logo for quite a while and tried to introduce them to e-toys. And what I found was that they were stuck. They liked the way of working in logo and had a hard time adapting to e-toys. So it's another lesson for technologies. How do we make the learning of new technologies even more transparent, faster, easier, so that there isn't this feeling that I want to stay with the old application just because I know how to use it and I don't know how to use something new. Because in 5 years, that new app will probably not be supported and you'll be on to something new. So adaptivity is incredibly important. I apologize for my moving back and forth. We have two things in terms of social environment. We have the community where you learn in order to belong, And what's more prevalent now in our learning environment is the collective. You belong in order to learn. You join online forums, you talk to people, but you join primarily because you have an interest in whatever the topic is and you want to learn about it. So you have that prior engagement. And the collective is where the learning is going to be occurring now and in our future. Scratch. Scratch, you may know, as an environment that comes, we've got Logo, and then eToys, and then Scratch. Well, there's some controversies between Alan and Mitch in the development of Scratch, because Scratch was so easy to start, and it doesn't have the endless capacity that eToys does. Scratch has a quick ceiling. But the thing that it does have, and that it did create, that has made it so much more successful than eToys, is that share part. The share with others. Now we have that, and I still work with the Squeakland Foundation. We have that as part, but that was the primary focus at MIT with Scratch, was to make that learning community a vibrant community. And it's a huge community. Kids make the tutorials. Kids help each other. They say, I have a problem. I need to know how to do X. Somebody else jumps in, says, oh, I've done that. Let me show you how. Somebody else says, oh, here's another way. So they're helping each other learn much faster, much easier, and it's how they'll learn in the future. So this share piece is incredibly important for all environments. eToys, unfortunately, we still make, many of the adults, and there were some talks at Squeakfest, still make many of the tutorials. And that's okay to a degree, but you can't possibly make all the things the kids are going to want to know how to do as a small group at the top. Literacy is now defined as all types of communication interactions. So all kinds. That's our digital interactions, our social in-person interactions, and our reading, listening, writing with text. But in the Scratch community, one of the things that's very interesting is that the kids learn how to behave appropriately in their communications with each other. There are some standards that are put up in the community, and kids are even more important with being kind to each other when they make comments about projects, helping each other, and giving credit to past projects that were made. They're encouraged to remix their projects. Take a project, remix it, make it different, make it yours. But when you mix it, you've got to have at least 3 major changes that you've made, and you still need to give credit to the past project. So it's really teaching a lot of digital citizenship that doesn't always happen in some other forums where we've got cases of mean girls, mean boys, saying things about each other. But this is the potential to create this literacy and a world where kids communicate in a different way. The challenges in these participation communities are that transparency, seeing what's happening, seeing who did what, and the ethics involved in giving credit, in not plagiarizing, in helping each other. Again, participation and creating producers instead of just consumers. So sometimes we think that we have a really sophisticated community of kids, and if you really look, a lot of times you'll see that they're handed an iPad or a computer, and they are simply playing games that have been made for them and doing things on apps that have been made for them, but they have no idea how to actually build something. And that's where our key comes in. I wanted to tell you a little bit about the River City Project, which was a project that I worked on with Harvard, and we actually did some studies. I'm based in California, and I was at UCLA, and Harvard is in Boston, which is the other side of the U.S., way over here, and I'm on this side. And the PhD student who was working on keeping the server going was based way over here in Japan. So between Japan, Boston, and California, we ran this whole project with the time differences and the kids there. Now this project is really fun. It was an epidemiology study, so kids actually went into a virtual world as people from the present time going into the past to discover why poor people were getting sick more often in the community than wealthier people. So it was set up as a river city in America, a city on a river with obvious pollution problems, etc. Students had all kinds of digital devices to use to check the water levels, to check for cholera, to do tests in different places, to check hospital records. And they went in as investigators, studied in this community, and came up with theories as to why there were problems in the community. The interesting thing is, it was wonderful because they would come up with ideas. Okay, if we change the tenements, we give more space, then we think this will change. So, using the power of technology, we would create a world for them where that's exactly what happened. So they would go back into that new world with those changes and find out what happened. And basically what they would find, no matter what their theory of the change was, that in each instance, yes, things got a little bit better, but problems are complex. And instead of just telling them about complexity, they learned that basically there were a lot of puzzle pieces to these problems of people getting sick, and that they all had to be solved in a comprehensive manner in order to solve the problem. It was a very sophisticated lesson for middle school kids to learn, but they completely understood this. And think about the implications for them taking over roles in our society in the future. Now, the interesting thing about River City was they could only use it during school time because that's all we were set up for. It wasn't set up over the network. And they were dying to be using it all the time. I'll keep going ahead. Another project that I worked with quite a bit is Yville. Has anybody in here heard of Yville? No. You've heard of Second Life? This was before Second Life. This actually was built by science educators at Caltech to help kids learn about science. So they put in many things. They do lots of games and things, and it's a whole community. They get clams, which is instead of pesos, to buy things in their community. And one of the things that was interesting about this community was it attracted many more girls than boys. its financial culture allowed you to change your avatar. So you would go in with, first it was what we call flesh-colored, kind of pinkish white face, and with the comments from the kids about diversity, it was changed. So your face was blue when you started now. And then you could change it in any way. But you had to go somewhere and buy the parts. So you could buy eyes and ears and faces and cool hair. And the avatar representation was only up to the shoulders. So you didn't buy a lot of clothes. But kids could actually create businesses in this world to manufacture the avatar pieces that others would buy. So they'd go in and create their own business and say, okay, I want to create all these different cool hairstyles. And then other girls would come in and go, oh, wow, I want to buy that one and that one. And so in order to get more clams, they would complete different science projects. But it became much more than that because it became a complete community. It now has more than 7 million users, and they have a newspaper. There's a government system. Kids actually talk to each other, decide what's good in the community, what's not. It's got a lot of parental controls on it, and it teaches kids about, again, kindness, ways to talk. If you get to chat in this community only after getting your chat license, which we should all sort of have to have, teaches us about the ways to chat nicely. So they get their chat license, but then if there are problems and if they are doing things in the world that isn't good, then they would get their avatar may have a big piece of tape across their mouth, and they can't talk for a week. And of course, talking and chatting with each other is a huge thing in this. So we did several science studies with this also. YPOX was spread in this society. So suddenly, kids would be talking to their friends, and they'd be trying to say something, and they'd keep saying, achoo, 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 achoo. And they couldn't communicate fluently. And much to their chagrin, if they've spent all this money, there's a lot of parallels to today's society, they've spent all this money on this beautiful avatar face, and suddenly it's gray, and it's got little spots all over it, and it's not so pretty. So they had an impetus to find out why. Again, it's called Whyville because lots of reasons to find out why. So they went to find out why. And they had to do a lot of studies. They would talk to each other. Where was this spreading? So we were actually spreading computer virus through this. There were different ways of it spreading, by talking to somebody, by being close, but we had different means of transmission. And the kids had to figure this out. There were many ways to figure it out. So we went through a whole study with this, and also did another study using vaccines. And middle school is the age that I love. I think it is the age at which you catch children, and they either are turned on and go on to find their own way in the world, or they can get completely lost. And at that point in time, you have so much power. It's so hard to pull back kids who've been lost after that point in time. But one of the things in epidemiology that we do study is the idea at that age, as kids are learning about transmission of disease, they're also learning about transmission of sexually transmitted diseases. And this is really important for them to have this knowledge. So it's kind of masked in Yville to learn about that. So we had vaccines that they could buy, and everybody got so much of the vaccine, and they could sell it, they could use it, they could buy more of it from somebody else. And we found that a lot of kids would end up selling their vaccine. So it's a really good place to start some intervention in terms of, well, what happens? And in a virtual world, you can then get really sick and have problems from that, and experiment with what really happens when you make bad choices. Whereas in the real world, there are consequences that can't always be overcome. So anyway, we did a lot with that, and with something called the red tide in California. Off our California coast, we have a time when we have these algae blooms, and it affects a lot of the fish population. But kids got to go out in boats from Los Angeles digitally in the digital world and do a lot of experiments there. But the thing about Yville that was really compelling is that it's a 24/7 environment. So unlike River City, which was only during school time, Yville was 24/7. And in doing this in a classroom, kids would beg, please, tell me that this is homework so I can tell my mom that I have to go online and I have to do this. So this is obviously the problem you want in school, that kids want to go in, want to find out more, want to do more. Now, there's a lot of social interaction there, but it's not bad. It's still a really good part of what they do. Maybe they're talking about a lot of different things, but they eventually get around to it, as we all do. In the workplace, we're not always talking about work. We're not always just discussing all of those things. We talk about our personal lives and other things, as do kids in these environments. So that's Yville. The collective, again, in Yville, in the River City, and the collectives in Scratch produce the inquiry, which is then the beginning of meaningful learning. So, what things help us to enable our people to thrive in this world that is ever-changing? This is from the Hewlett Foundation in 2010. It's their study of education, and they said job applicants are ill-equipped to solve complex problems, work in teams, or communicate effectively. And they talk about harnessing the deeper skills of critical thinking, problem solving, effective communication, collaboration, and learning to learn. These things do not happen in traditional environments. They happen in open collectives like the environments that we just talked about. So education, technology, and learning to embrace change. Change as, again, a big theme. So, teaching-based approach or learning-based approach. Again, right now, this is synonymous with a teaching-based approach. I'm, quote, the sage on the stage, but the learning-based approach, teacher or mentor, is the, what we call, guide on the side. Oh, you might try this, so you might try this, but not the end-all and be-all and the person with all of the answers. First of all, there is no way that any one of us can have all of the answers in this society. And this is also a problem with teachers wanting to use new technologies in classrooms, that they fear that they should know the technology completely before they introduce it to their students. And that's not necessary. They can also model learning to learn something new and not being really good at it. That's okay, to show kids that that is what we're all doing. We're always learning new things. So, difference between learning and being taught. Huge difference. I'll just let you read this. This is shift with an F happens. So solving problems that aren't even problems yet. We're having to, as educators, think like a quarterback. American football has a quarterback, which is a position in which they throw the ball to their receiver. But the receiver may be here now, but by the time the ball is there, they will be way down the field. So we have to think like quarterbacks and throw the ball where the kids will be, not where they are now. But we don't know where they will be. Can we, any of us, truly imagine the world even 10 years from now? Think of 10 years ago, technologically, and now try to predict 10 years in the future? It's very difficult. But we're preparing them for that world. How do we prepare them? Through problem solving, thinking, being able to learn, having these dynamic skills, not just static skills of being able to take multiple choice tests and find the correct answer. I just want to give a little bit to, I was at UCLA for many, many years. I was at the UCLA Lab School, and the school is based on Piaget's constructivist learning. And it's a progressive school. Kids learn to learn, and there is a culture within the school. And this is something that I want to point out. It's really difficult for any one teacher to make a change in an environment because kids come from another classroom. They're used to things. I had somebody say to me once, I have an idea for getting kids to talk. You go around the room and then one person will say something, the other person will say something. And yes, that's great, because when I would go out into other schools and do consulting in other places, I would have that problem. But in this school, kids talked. Getting them to stop talking, that was the problem. And it wasn't off topic. They were on topic. And they knew how to discuss and to talk with each other and how to appreciate others' comments. So you would hear things like, building on what Sue said, I think I agree with Sam because, but, and you hear this at very young levels of children. So they're able to talk, discuss. That's a primary skill for the workplace, for the world in the future. This is just a little bit about the diversity there. You can see we have a high Latino piece. This school is made to reflect the demographics of California. So as a lab school, we only accept kids that will... It's a school that could never exist anywhere else, because there would be different communities where you would have higher ethnic groups in one than other. But it's not just ethnicity, it's socioeconomic, how much money. You have very wealthy to homeless children. You have parents who are, you have two parents who are mommies, two parents who are daddies. We have a lot of that. So it reflects what California is, so that all of the research that comes out of the school is completely relevant to California. The school also does a lot of outreach in Los Angeles. They have teachers from all over come and see how things are done to try to help address change. I was part of putting together Managing Information in a Digital Age, which was to help teachers, help kids manage that, and that has spurred a whole program that is at the school where teachers come over an entire year, once a month on a Saturday, and immerse themselves in new ways of learning. So this is the big piece, embrace change. To learn, we need to embrace change. Where we are right now, that's what we have. And change motivates and challenges us, and it also forces us to learn differently. We can't use the old paradigms. We can't have kids sitting in desks, not active, not engaged. We have to get up, get them moving, get them experiencing, and making meaning, talking to each other, working with each other. So, this is, how did kids learn about Harry Potter? So, did all the kids in Argentina learn about Harry Potter? A lot of them? Okay. If they were at that age when the books came out, the 7 different books over 10 years, you would see kids carrying these really thick books and reading them. It wasn't part of an assignment for school. They would go online. They would talk to each other. They would have discussions about this. They learned in a collective. And they would debate. And it's not that they're learning about Harry Potter and, oh, that's useful. But the way they learned was incredibly powerful. And the amount they learned and were able to discuss and were able to talk about and were able to predict different outcomes. The books were written so that it was really clear that there weren't all these little hints about what would happen to each character. So before the next book came out, there were all these forums that, well, I think this is what's going to happen to Harry, and this is what I think is going to happen to Hermione, this is what Ron might do. So they were predicting the future, thinking about things because of the evidence they had from the past. And then when the new books came out, they go, oh, well, okay, maybe the next step is this. But they learned differently. They learned in a collective. They learned without a teacher. Now, if we have the educational system, what can we do with them? How can we help them to learn the things we think are important? Play and imagination. I just want to revisit Piaget a little bit. Play and imagination are so important. Those are our pieces. The need for play as we get older is sometimes perceived as less important. But it's not, because it's how we learn. And especially in our ever-changing world, it is one of the ways that we make sense of our world. It's the way kids make sense of their world. Today's world is ever-changing, and in that stable world, they could not play as you got to be an adult. You could get old and stodgy and not do anything new. In this world, it's not possible. Everybody needs to learn to play or keep playing. It's again our strategy for embracing change. So there are skills and dispositions for good learners too. And they get better at learning to learn. You'll see lots of lists of what we call 21C skills or 21st century skills. And most of them have at least these and then many others. But critical thinking, problem solving, communication, collaboration, creativity, innovation, and nowhere on these lists will you find memorizing facts, dates, getting multiple choice questions correct. But problem solving, it's our big key. So, switching back to programming. Future of education, future of programming. Bill Gates said we're in the golden age. Says there are more programmers and they're better than they were. But knowledge representation and logic representation. And these are areas in our digital world that need to be need to be worked on. I'm working currently for the last several years with people at the Open University in Milton Keynes in the UK. And we're doing things working with different environments that help argument, representation, social networking for learning. And these are really important at this point in time. We have one thing called the Evidence Hub, where people will go in, put in evidence, make arguments. Anybody familiar with some of those? No. But we'll make arguments, represent them, have other people come in, so they learn what it is to truly discuss. Okay, in the past, we had our kids here. John Dewey, anybody familiar here? John Dewey, American philosopher. Okay, at that point in time, he died in 1952, the middle of the last century. But he still said the teacher does not impose the ideas on the child. When we follow him, sometimes we're still back in this world. We're still back in everybody doing the same thing at the same time, at the same level. Are grades really necessary? Are all kids who are 10 years old needing to do the same things at the same time every day? Could it be that they work on different projects that are self-selected, that are personally meaning to them? So what's our message in terms of programming? Should computer science be part of formal schooling? Should it be in our school environments? So there's a big move right now. In the UK, computer science is becoming part of the e-baccalaureate. In the US, computer science is now being considered one of the sciences as that are required as part of the general education requirement. In Australia, this group, Learnable.com, donated money for kids to learn to code. It's all free. They think every student should have the opportunity to learn to code. Our U.S. former president said he was emphasizing the idea of a good job, a demand for training in computer science. And we know there's a huge shortage right now in computer scientists that are coming out. Barack Obama said, produce stuff and not just consume stuff. He uses stuff a lot. Mark Zuckerberg also talked about there aren't enough trained people who have these skills today. And then, I don't know if that's the right message. Is it the job that we want for people? Is that the reason that we want to teach computer science? Do we want them to learn it because we want all of our kids to grow up and be computer scientists? Maybe. Okay, I'm going to move on. Maybe Bill Gates talks about programming stretching your mind, makes you think better, a way of thinking about things that is different. Steve Jobs said, teaches you how to think. Coding is now becoming cool. So if it does teach you how to think, can we get on this train before it leaves the station and help kids learn to code? Help them learn to code to think. There's an awful lot going on right now. I don't know if you're familiar with code.org, but this is Chris Bosh. He's on the Miami Heat, so he's cool in terms of kids because he's a sports player. But he's learning to program and then willing to say, hey, I'm learning to program. I'm an adult. I'm learning to program. And the code.org is offering this. It's in the U.S., but it's December this year, December 9th to 15th, saying 1 hour of code for everybody. So if there's a way It would be great if the whole world could participate in this. It's 1 hour. Can each of you go to a school, offer to help kids learn to code, and just for an hour, because if you really do a good job in 1 hour and you turn them on, there are 30 kids in that class, you may have turned on 30 kids that will then go and keep going after you're gone. So it's just this 1 hour of code, ages 6 to 106. I think we're all in that category. And no math needed, and no computers either. They've actually got a lot on the site, and there is a no computer option to actually use things like paper cups and things that if the school doesn't have the digital equipment, you can actually teach some of the principles of coding without having to have a computer for every child. And let me see if I can just give you this for a minute. And it may not.
Here we are, 2013.
Is that coming up?
We all depend on technology to communicate, to bank, and none of us know how to read and write code.
The first program I wrote asked things like, what's your favorite color? Or how old are you?
I wrote a program to play tic-tac-toe.
This sign has me a green circle and a red square appear on the screen.
You're just trying to make something,
Okay.
I made a mistake.
It's okay.
So now we can see the word. You can put it on again.
Okay. You think it'll work?
Yeah.
Okay.
What's that? Los volúmenes de los auriculares y los programas son independientes del círculo de notas.
Y de computer. Can you turn the volume up?
Oh, there it is. Oh, it went down when that was on there. Okay.
Sorry.
Otra vez.
Otra vez.
Okay, start from the beginning.
There you go.
Thank you.
Here we are, 2013. All depend on technology to communicate, to bank, and none of us know how to read and write code.
Except the
program I wrote asks things like, what's your favorite color? Or how old are you?
I wrote a program to play tic-tac-toe.
My first sign has me a green circle and a red square appear on the screen.
You're just trying to make something, trying to transfer something from your mind to the computer to tackle it's an experience.
The whole limit of the system is just that there just aren't enough people who are trained and have these skills today.
The programmers of tomorrow are the wizards of the future. You know, you're going to look like you have magic powers compared to everybody else.
Great coders are taking contracts. That's it.
This is, whoops. This is a 1-minute video right from the code.org site. If you want to try to show others, there's a 1-minute, there's a 5-minute, and there's a 9-minute that you can go to that just talk about the idea of coding. So if you have them for 10 minutes, you could show a school, hey, let's see if we can get your whole school this week doing an hour of code. And now it's not going to go. Shoot. Okay, let's see if this will work. Okay, so there's also codeyear.com is another organization saying learn to build something, and they had almost 500,000 people in 2012 through their organization, Learning to Code. It's not working. Okay, now that's not working. Taking a look at why we need to learn to code, you may be familiar with Mark Guzdial, who did several books on Squeak. He's at Georgia Tech. And Elliot Soloway, who's at University of Michigan. And he's been researching and making all kinds of educational technologies for the past 30 years. They're saying computer science is more important than calculus. And yet calculus is usually in what we consider our general education requirements for liberal education, that everybody should take calculus. Yet, if you've taken calculus, how much do you use it now? How often do you use it now? Does computer science maybe transfer to what we need in ways of thinking better than calculus? And maybe we should look at replacing that. Not that everybody might not take calculus. Some people may still take it. But the usefulness for everyone, the study of process being important to everyone. I think this is not going to allow me to... Yeah, it broke. So we changed the software paradigm, but the education paradigm stayed the same. And I just want to go briefly into revolutions that made us ask this question, and who started those revolutions. Our last century, we had the computer technologies for education, child development, and artificial revolutions. In the middle of the last century, these ideas were really formed. We're hopefully to the point where we're going to start acting on them. Piaget was child development, and his idea of Piaget's child was like a Robinson Crusoe. He was inner-driven, curious, but reflective, mostly inside. From Piaget with constructivism, we moved to Papert with constructionism and the idea of building things. And Papert said that it was really important to have some big ideas, and that the most important big idea of all was that there was the idea of powerful ideas. Papert's child is different. Papert's child dives into unknown situations, and that is a crucial part of learning. So now we have Piaget stepping back and Papert diving in. And in some ways we have a cognitive dance that in really good situations is what's happening. So you're reflective about your learning, and you're diving in and just trying new things. And then you're stepping back and then having detachment and reflection again. And then re-engagement. So a kind of cognitive dance with this, helping to learn. Vygotsky was very important. People know about Vygotsky a little bit? Okay, not a lot. He was not known in the Western world. He was Russian, and all of his work was first came to the Western world in 1930. And his idea was development cannot be separated from its social context. And this is actually so important right now in our ever-changing world. We're finding that this is key. His theories were ignored from the 30s till about the 70s. And with the work with Papert and with Minsky in artificial intelligence, they started paying more attention to these ideas. And so now we have that idea of reflection, diving in, and being in a social context in order to learn. Artificial intelligence, I jumped ahead a bit. That's Marvin Minsky. And our computer science, computer technologies for education. And if we look at who is at the center of all three of these revolutions, it becomes really clear that Papert is the one who's at the center. And he worked with Marvin Minsky on neural nets back in the 60s. And now we're getting into our semantic web. And these were predicted at that time. So I'm going to go briefly through programming being applied logic and programming to learn. I just want to tell you briefly about, we've gone from Logo, eToys, and Squeak, and Scratch. From Scratch, Scratch does have a ceiling, and one developer who actually is a lawyer in Germany, Jens Montag, decided that he wanted to start something so that he could expand the capabilities of Scratch. So he built something called BYOB, or Build Your Own Blocks. He then began working with Brian Harvey at University of California at Berkeley. And they came out with the next system called SNAP, and now SNAP 2.0. This system is being used to teach beginning computer science at Berkeley. And the name of the course is The Beauty and Joy of Computing. A little nicer than usually the names that we give these courses. But looking at it from that different aspect. But that's all created, and the feedback from the students on this course are phenomenal. They've been teaching it for 3 or 4 years now, and the feedback has helped make some changes in what they're doing. But they've got, and you can go online and get a lot of the course materials, see the syllabus, and check out what they're doing. I'm going to go on from here. So again, back to the idea, we've got all this change going on, and in video games, kids have ways of learning. They learn about how to do what's in the game, not that that's what you want them to learn, but they learn it quickly. It's fast-paced learning. It's engaging. They want to do it. It's motivating. It's rewarding. They get rewards within the system. And how can we compare that to school and keep the same world, which many times comes across as slow, boring, and out of touch? And then we lose kids, and they become at risk for dropping out of school, dropping out of society. So the way it could be, if teachers have a different theory of knowledge. Papert said, what would happen if children who can't do math grew up in math land, a place that is to math what France is to French? So obviously the whole Logo system was about teaching math to kids in accessible ways. I'm going to just go. So this is another book you might be interested in, Program or Be Programmed. Don't know if you're familiar with it, but it's 10 Commands for a Digital Age. And again, he talks about programming being a critical thinker. And the only way to know what's going on in the digital environment and to make willful choices about the roles you play. So I'm going to skip through. I thought I pulled a lot of this out. Teaching and learning, just the ideas of Piaget and Papert, dwelling in and stepping back, And this is between you and your artifact, whatever it is you're creating. Again, the idea of building something is paramount. In the Commonwealth, the global demand of learning, these are projections, indicate that the world's higher education systems must accommodate nearly 80 million more students by 2025. To do so in conventional campuses would require the opening of 3 large campuses every week for the next 13 years. Is it possible? Or do we need another new way, especially for higher education? Have any of you heard of or participated in Moocs? Okay, heard of? How about participated in? I challenge you to try it. See if you learn what you like about it, what you don't like about it. There are 2 kinds of Moocs now. There's a whole new theory of education which was purported by George Siemens, who is at the University of Athabasca in British Columbia, which is Connectivist education theory. Again, building on the social connections, that we must make these connections in order to learn, and we must make them digitally. Those are run on open source learning platforms, and they're led by academics. The Moocs, which are also expanding, are online versions of traditional formats, and they're on many of these brand new learning platforms that are owned by private enterprise. There's several of them coming out near me at Stanford that are being tested first, and then they get venture capitalists because it's right in the middle of Silicon Valley, and they're buying the platforms and moving them out. But these courses are free at this point in time. They don't necessarily give credit or certification as we have at this point in time, but that's something that'll need to be worked out in the future. How will we do that? And is that a possibility? So some of these courses have 6,000 students in them. There's a high dropout rate in some of them, but it's because a lot of people, it's a free course, and when you offer it free, a lot of people will come, and they may not really be interested in staying. So there's a whole controversy as to whether these are good or bad for us, but the pro-MOOC producing literature is that it provides an opportunity for people who would otherwise not have those provisions for learning. So I just wanted to bring up the Moocs. It's a little bit on how people disagree and the controversy and the headlines. And if you want to find out more, there's a lot on Moocs. And this is George Siemens, who actually described this whole theory of constructivism, how knowledge and skills emerge from making connections, and the learner's exposure to social and cultural experiences is what aids the learning. The last piece yes?
The people in charge of the schedule are making a lot of...
I'm sorry. Okay. I'm so sorry. Okay, so I'm going to just finish up real quick. I just want to talk about women in computer science very quickly. There are many organizations coming up to help women learn to code specifically, but women represented 12% of all computer science graduates right now. If we look around the room, I actually see more women than I expected to, which is great. But on the whole, throughout the world, it's not a big percentage. In 1984, there were 37% of all CS graduates were women. So why has there been a downturn? We need to give women the access. This is a woman at Harvey Mudd University, and she took over in 2006. She's a computer scientist and a mathematician, and she wanted to get more women into CS. So she changed some things. And this may be hard to read. So one of their introductory courses was CS5, and it dominated the class. Young men, dominated the class. This is something that happens. We know it happens a lot in middle school math, where girls get turned off for math also. The female students were unwilling to go on in computer science because of the stereotypes, and they realized that they were helping to perpetuate the stereotypes of the geeky male who was a computer scientist. So to reduce the intimidation factor, they divided the course. And they said, okay, these are for anybody with no prior experience. And if you wanted to go into that, maybe that section was all girls. There's evidence in the research that when women learn in all-girls schools, they do better. The inverse is not true, that men in all boys actually don't do better. They you need us to temper your temperament. But women who may be shyer about speaking out with a male environment and may be intimidated by that are not, and then develop as leaders and are able to take on leadership roles later and work more easily with men. I'm not saying we break us up completely, but to give women opportunities to have time with just women where they can develop themselves to that point is key. And the course focus changed to computational approaches to solving problems across science, which was, again, something that seems to appeal more. That's one of the pieces for Whyville, why that is more engaging to girls, is because it does appeal to solving problems across science, which tends to broaden the field outside of just the coding. So there's some different organizations: Code Ed, Iridescent, Working Women, Rails Workshops for Women. There are a couple books out, Recoding Gender. I don't know if you're familiar with the MIT app, App Inventor. It's a very cool app, makes inventing apps very easy. And there's a technological foundation in Silicon Valley that's done several tech invention workshops. And these girls are from East Palo Alto, which there's a couple sections of Palo Alto. It's a lower socioeconomic group. A lot of parents who are not home most of the time. Parents are not, don't have higher education. These girls work together. They were the EPA Chica Squad, and they created a really cool app that said where the graffiti was and set up events to help clean it up using that app. So they were completely empowered by the experience. So other things about women. In the New York Times, How to Be a Woman Programmer. And I'm going to skip by. I didn't have enough for today, I think. I just want to sort of close with constructionism is not a spectator sport. We need those changes. We need play. We need change. We need imagination. We need questioning. And I just want to leave you with this quote, which is, for everything you do. It's hard to improve on Goethe. So, thank you very much. Any questions? We have time for maybe one or two.
I appreciate your talk. I've been always interested in something, I think you call it learning versus being tough, and I always thought about it like just-in-time learning versus just-in-case learning. It's like learning when you need things or learning in case you will. But there's a line, I think, maybe I'm wrong, but kids tend to learn faster and better and more. So there are things you won't need until you are grown up. And if somebody doesn't come and teach you them before that, or make you need them before you will, then you won't. And so that's one way to ask you, where is the line? How much needs to be...
So there is a line. I think part of it is, if you think about what is the learning, there are two kinds of knowledge. There's tacit knowledge and there's explicit knowledge. And tacit knowledge is the kind that we're getting from computers. That's the kind of knowledge that we used to be able to let nurture over time, that kids would learn about the world from their parents, they would learn their place in the world, but it wasn't explicitly taught. Explicitly teaching things like, what is the speed of light? That's not something we expect will change. That's explicit learning. So things like that will not change. But to teach them something that will be changing in their world, that's where I think the line is. And just-in-time learning is incredibly important, because it's part of that learning to learn, because it's just this prediction, where will the world be in these 10 years? And nurturing these ideas of playing, questioning, being able to change, and keeping that imagination are going to give kids the tools that they need to adapt to that world. We don't even know what their world will be. And we don't know what kinds of jobs will be there for them. And somehow we have to prepare them for it. So we can't just give them the old curriculum.
But it has to be mixed.
Yes.
I'm all for just in case. Right?
Yes.
But there has to be mixed. There's some, you really have to be mixed.
Yes, and that's kind of this difference between the explicit, which is, it's easier for me to just tell you certain things. I don't want you to go, discovery learning was a big thing at one point, but there are certain things you don't need to discover. I can just tell you them easier. But certain things you have to sort of learn over time. And tacit learning, which is that kind of learning that you used to have a lot of time to learn before you grew up, that is happening very quickly in the digital world. And it's helping our kids to make that bridge, if the conditions are correct. And if we help them to be in worlds that help kind of mediate what I would call appropriate interactions, like Scratch, like Yville, that have rules for how you engage and rules for conduct that say, you respect each other and you talk about it and you can disagree, but you disagree in a way that respects the other person. Did that answer? No.
Sorry, what about the grown-ups? I mean, we've learned a lot, but we continue learning what is the best way, what is there for us.
So again, these Moocs are incredible. There's so much being offered. I would take a look, if you look at, one is called Coursera. Okay, if you know Coursera, if you know Venture Labs, those are both out of Stanford. There's a couple out of Purdue, but they're offering these courses. They're free, they're online, and you'll get a variety of people, but I've been trying them, and I've had really good experiences. You kind of try to find people who are serious enough to complete the course and complete whatever artifacts are sort of required of you. But it's a good way to work with people, and every team that I've worked with in these courses has been worldwide. And that's another thing I think for our kids, for our future. Our world is shrinking. We need to know how each other thinks about things and get the diversity of our thoughts and our cultures together. And the more we can interface in these kind of courses, the more we can do that.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.